Welcome to the Brain Network podcast. Today I'm talking to Michael Gilbert, a person with a Corpus Callosum Disorder, and we're going to tap into his lived experience about having a Corpus Callosum Disorder. First question I want to ask is about your diagnosis. How did you get diagnosed, and what was that like?
I was diagnosed at 23. I had a severe headache and got administered to a hospital, and had a CT scan from memory. And the doctor basically came to me and said, "Did you know that you're missing part of your brain?" And I had no idea about it. And as soon as I found it out, I did anything and everything to research the condition. And for years and years, that's all I did in my spare time.
Yeah.
But last couple of years, I haven't had anything to do with it.
Yeah, absolutely. So it can be quite confronting to get that news. And you and I are similar age. And I found out incidentally as well later in life. I didn't have headaches. If you don't mind me asking, did they ever find out what the cause of the headaches was? And has that journey sort of resolved?
No, that's it subsided. So,
and how did your doctor sort of give you that news, and what was their way of looking at it?
It was just an ED doctor,
Okay.
and it was basically said, "Are you aware that you're missing part of your brain, called the corpus callosum?" And I had no idea what it meant. So first thing I did when I got home was went to Dr. Google and had his sticky beak at Corpus Callosum Disorders, watching numerous videos and studying them.
And I have to admit, I did the same thing. I was told that it had nothing to do with everything else that was going on in my life, my anxiety and depression and stuff. And I do think that it does now that I've done a bit more research, but I couldn't help myself but go and Google it. I found a lot of stuff initially until I did a proper, real deep dive and got into the weeds. I found a lot of stuff that didn't relate to me because it's talking about kids, it's talking about pregnancy, it's talking about people with lots of needs that I didn't have. Did you find stuff that related to you straight away, or did it take a little?
Yeah, yes and no. A lot of the signs and symptoms, you had a look, and you're ticking boxes. That's me. That's me. That's me. That's not me. And I came to the conclusion that ACC is obviously a very broad spectrum. My case is completely different to yours, and so on. But broad topics like socializing, that's a huge one for people with ACC. Relationships, emotions, and things like problem solving. So academics at school, I did struggle with to a degree in certain areas. Others I excelled at.
Yeah. Did that give you a bit of a context for some of the stuff that you had struggled with earlier in life? Like, so you had the problem solving thing going on. So what sort of stuff happened in school?
Well, it explained a lot. When I found out the diagnosis, looking back into my childhood, why I got kept down in year one, why it took longer to tie my shoes, ride a bike, why I wasn't that good at maths. But that also came into an interest thing. I excel at certain subjects or topics if I'm interested in them.
Yes.
If I've got no interest, you can basically forget about it, like maths, for example. But things like history, modern history, I was at the top of my class, and I had a broad knowledge of certain topics that I learnt through high school.
Yeah. And it's such an important point to make for the community, that you have some areas where you've struggled, but you've got strengths as well. It's not just about the negative stuff. And that's awesome that you've been able to recognize that you're a bit of a history buff. I know a couple of people with corpus callosum disorders that are history buffs. I don't know. I wonder if it's a thing. I think it's a thing in ADHD to be, and autism to be like really good at certain things that you're obsessed with. And why I bring that up, not knowing if you have those diagnoses and assuming that you don't, is there's a relationship between those diagnoses and corpus callosum disorders. There's that part of that neurodiversity umbrella. We sort of have a we have that trait that we share with ADHD and stuff, where you have things that you're interested in. When you have that interest, you can excel at it. And I think that's that can be a strength that we can tap into. But I want to ask, like things like maths, how do you go in your daily life when it comes to maths and stuff? Is that an issue for you? Is there...
I have a basic understanding and grasp of maths.
Yeah.
But when it comes to the more complex things like algebra, you know, when you're combining letters and numbers, that's what stumps me. And I have no interest in it, so therefore I just did not pursue it or succeed.
Yeah. So, sorry, I interrupted. Keep going if you...
No, you're right.
I know this is probably archaic and less of an issue now, but like counting change and stuff, basic maths is okay. And then algebra is algebra is like another level of abstract stuff. And I think that's the issue with maths when it comes to us, our community. The corpus callosum disorder community is, insofar as maths is difficult, I think abstract thought is the thing that we can struggle with. And the more advanced, so to call it, maths stuff, the more abstract it gets. So the more real you can make it, like counting change, you know, when you're buying something, you can touch the coins, you can sort of ascribe value to them. It's it's not very real. Money's not real, but like it's more real than algebra. So I think I did okay with algebra personally, but I did struggle with higher levels of maths. And I guess the problem with higher levels of maths, like calculus and stuff, the hard part in that is the algebra. So basic algebra I was okay with, but I have to admit, if I struggled with higher levels of maths, it's because of the algebra, because that's the hard part. So coordination was an issue for me. And I want to ask, you're a truck driver, which requires, as far as I'm concerned, you got to be switched on for one thing. You got to be coordinated too. So how do you go with that?
Well, it was a struggle to start off with, but I suppose practice makes perfect. I did struggle learning to drive the truck with coordination of gear changes for like a 18-speed gearbox, for example, and reversing 26-meter B doubles all the time. It took me a long time to do it, but I got there. I might have been ridiculed by the drivers for not being able to pick it up as quick, but it is what it is. And I have overcome a lot of challenges in my life, and I'm very proud of that. For what I've done, and especially knowing that I have this condition.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's such a positive and great position for you to see yourself in, as being someone who can contextualize the challenges that you've had with this information that you got later in life, and be proud of the things that you've achieved. I think that's a really healthy outlook, and it's a really good way to think about it. So I drive a manual car, which seems to be a thing that not everyone in our community does. And I can speak to the thing that I didn't know I had the condition when I was learning to drive, but I had heaps of practice. So,
Mhm.
like you said, practice makes perfect. Having said that, I would be terrible in a truck. Never driven a truck with 18 gears before, so I'm sure that that would be terrible. So I can certainly commend you that skill that you've developed coordination wise. What sort of stuff coordination wise did you have trouble with growing up? You mentioned the shoelace thing. I think I took a little bit longer like than my peers to learn that fine motor stuff. I think it's fine motor stuff when you're talking about like handwriting and manipulating shoelaces. So I struggled with that. And what other stuff was that like in your childhood?
Handwriting, my ability or skills at kicking the footy with kids that was another one. I was a bit goofy with the football.
Yep.
So I suppose you feel a little bit left out in that regard.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that comes down to the socializing side of things as well. So
Yeah.
but,
Anything that helped?
no, practice.
Yeah.
I'm a firm believer in repetition.
Yes.
I like doing the same thing over and over again.
Yeah.
I don't like going out of my comfort zone.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's an interesting thing. I'll get back to that. But first I want to ask, like, my folks, people around me, didn't know what was going on because I got the diagnosis later in life, but they knew that I was uncoordinated. So I got a lot of like support in that repetition thing that you're talking about. That's so important because it was like, you kind of have to do this stuff. So we're going to get you to keep doing it and doing it until you can get it. So that's, I would call that getting out of your comfort zone. So you said not about, you mentioned not getting out of your comfort zone. How do you sort of, can you expand on that a bit?
I've always been wanting for repetition. If I go out of my comfort zone, I can get very anxious.
Okay.
And I'm a lot slower at doing things than your neurotypical person would do.
Yeah.
Especially within the learning process. Like often if I was to learn something, I'd have to read it as opposed to just watching someone do it.
Okay. So you have that particular learning style rather than you'd rather read about it than watch somebody do it. I understand what you're saying about the comfort zone thing now. So you sort of like, you don't want to bite off more than you can chew. You want to manage your anxiety. Because I would think that that repetition, that would be a bit of pushing yourself. Like you're repeating something that you can't quite do until you get it. But you're talking about having a manageable amount of stuff on your plate in terms of what you're working on and improving and stuff. I can sort of speak to not relating to football in particular, because I was terrible at that. And then that because that's such a big opportunity to socialize, you sort of cut out from that. You sort of talked about that. But being in sports, other sports, sort of, and other activities, as someone who has difficulty socializing, gives you an opportunity to have something to talk about to somebody, have that mutual thing to talk about that you can then start socializing with them. So I struggled with socialization, and you mentioned that as well. What kind of stuff did you struggle with? What was that like?
I've always struggled making friends through primary school, high school, outside of that as well, just out and about. I have had a few friends over the years, but very few, and I suppose they're all close. But I have pushed friends away over the years, especially after my diagnosis, because a lot of people don't understand it or don't accept it. Even family members who often who I'll explain to them about my condition after learning about it and telling them this is why. They have said in the past things like I'm using my ACC as an excuse, which is an absolute cop out on their behalf.
Of course, The whole using the ACC thing as an excuse is so misguided. I think it's a way to help you navigate the challenges that you face, and it's a tool for you to make that navigation of some of the challenges you might have better. So it's not about, I don't think it ever is about saying I can't do this, I don't want to do this, and I'm lazy or whatever. It's always about we're going to approach this issue in this way with this information that we have about this diagnosis. And what you sort of mentioned before is that big journey that you went on to find information about it on the internet, because doctors don't know much about it. That's such a big thing when you do find useful information, because that's what that is. It's being able to have this tool that sort of helps you navigate stuff. I think we have a cultural problem in many countries with adult men forming friendships. Like we all sort of get a few friends in high school and college or whatever, and then after that it's kind of really hard to make friends in general. And then on top of that, like we both have not the best set of social skills, so that sort of blocks you out even more. I recognized early on in my childhood that I didn't socialize well, so I sort of watched other people, took on like everyone's advice, and then tried out things and saw what stuck, and sort of watched other people and copied them, I guess. I don't want to say copied them, but like learnt from how they did things. That was like my biggest thing, because like I could never probably do it any better way. Is like see how things pan out when somebody says something like that, and then maybe I'll do that, or maybe I won't do that. I don't know if that was something that you recognized early on and did, or
no, not particularly in my case, but I could after learning about my diagnosis, I could go back to my childhood and I can see this is why I did that. I could see why it was hard to get a girlfriend. Make it hard to socialize in a big group. One-on-one, I'd be happy to have a conversation with someone. If I got put in a group of 20 people, I'd be silent the whole night if we were going out for a dinner or a party or whatever.
So it's sort of, I would hope, I don't know, but I would hope that makes you feel a bit better about what happened in your childhood, now that you have a bit of understanding of what was sort of going on. Because we often sort of put it up to moral failings and stuff like that. What other things would you put in as part of your Corpus Callosum Disorder experience? We talked about coordination and socializing. What else is there?
So emotions or relationships. I've always struggled to form relationships with a partner. My emotions, I'm very stagnant. I'm not a very lovey-dovey kind of person. I can be standoffish quite a lot, and people have told me that in the past, but it's not me. It's not intentional.
Having said all that, you are married, and you have children, so there must be something that you got going for you in that department. How did that happen? How did you find getting into the relationship with your wife and your relationship now? She's obviously gels with you. She's obviously your type. Is it that you found a certain type of person, or what happened?
So I met her online and had a couple of dates with her, and realised how highly intelligent she was, and that drew me towards her.
Yep.
And here we are 5 years later, and we've built a relationship. We've built a house and a little family with another one on the way now. So
yeah. How long to go until the second one comes?
Late January.
Far out. Not long now. Are you ready? Are you ready for it?
Somewhat.
Do you know the gender?
Yeah, girl.
Oh, cool. So that means you got 2 girls?
Yeah.
Awesome. Not that the gender matters, but it's the only bit of information that we have at this stage. So, I can speak to having trouble getting into relationships and trouble even getting started. Like, I didn't know how to initiate. I didn't know where to start, any of that sort of stuff. And I got into my relationship that I'm in. I want to say later in life, in my mid-20s, I think that was the time before was just like, big thing was watching other people in relationships and just trying to figure it all out and having no confidence, not even trying, and just taking it all in from the people around me and sort of seeing what worked and what didn't work and having conversations with people about their relationships. Because I think relationships is one of those things that, like, people will talk to you about their relationships whether you want them to or not. So you get I like hearing, some people say, don't take advice from certain people. I like hearing everyone's advice, and then if I don't think it's any good, I'll chuck it away or put it on the shelf. But I still want to hear the things not to do as well as the things to do. So just having that, starting that process of getting in relationships a bit later than other people, just having all that information from making observations was the thing. And I guess, I wasn't ready until I was ready, but just having the confidence to start trying was a game changer. And I really struggled having the confidence in the first place, knowing that I didn't have a lot going for me in the relationship department. So that was always going to be a big roadblock. But I think it's such a great thing to look at somebody like yourself who's had trouble in school and trouble in relationships, who's got a stable and great career, and has a relationship and a family. To see both sides of that and see you overcome these things. So is there anything else that you would, I think we've covered everything I can imagine. Is there anything else that you would ascribe to the experience of having a corpus callosum disorder?
I'm not 100% sure, to be honest.
It's like you said before, it's different for every person. So it's a difficult question to answer because it's, you could go either way. Can I ask what particular diagnosis you had?
I have a complete agenesis.
Okay. All right. And did they find anything else in the scan?
The only thing I'm aware of is missing the septum pellucidum. Okay.
So as far as I'm aware, I think when you have complete agenesis, you pretty much always have the septum pellucidum missing as well. And then in the cases of the partial agenesis, depending on which bit has gone or how it's manifested depends on whether you've got the septum pellucidum as well. What changes do you want to see in the school system, hospital system, broader society, in terms of people with corpus callosum disorders?
I would like to see the Australian government and state governments recognise ACC as a disability, as it is. So I was born with a congenital brain disorder.
Yep.
So I was born literally missing part of my brain. So it's no different to an amputee or someone born without a leg.
Yep.
The Australian Medical Association don't recognise it because they don't know much about it. The Australian Medical Society haven't had much to do with this condition other than research facilities such as the Queensland Brain Institute or universities down in Victoria.
I 100% agree. The challenge for the community and for many rare conditions is getting recognition in the systems that could support us, whether it's the healthcare or disability sector, education sector as well. It's not really that rare, depending on what source you read. It's 1 in 2,000, 1 in 4,000. It's the most common of the rare conditions, and it's like we have not all of the evidence that we could benefit from, but we have a body of literature that says what kind of challenges this community might face, and getting that recognition has been a great challenge. And it's disheartening to see that we have the evidence, but we can't move forward with it. So I totally understand where you're coming from, and I love the way that you've described it as like it's like an amputee. You are missing part of your brain, and that comes with challenges that we know about. You wouldn't say to an amputee that they're not going to have challenges if they're missing an arm or a leg. You're not going to say that it doesn't matter, or that of course they can overcome those things. They can get prosthetics and all sorts of stuff. And it's the same with someone with a corpus callosum disorder. They can get accommodations and stuff like that. But to outright deny it is crazy, and there's quite a bit of that going on, which is we're trying to change it. I think it's slowly changing. Things are getting better, but it's just it's not where it needs to be.
It's part of like your normal GP. I've been to so many GPs over the years who ask your medical history, and you say, I've got agenesis of the corpus callosum, and they look at you dumbfounded. It's used to say, what on earth is that?
Yeah.
Most GPs do not know anything about the condition, and when I tell them about it, they go straight to Wikipedia.
Yes.
But it would be nice to for it to be recognised as a disability, especially considering it is such a spectrum disorder.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's different cases, and you've got partial agenesis, complete agenesis, thinning. There's so many different areas of it, and then different cognitive abilities as well.
Yeah. I want to ask, how do you find being a self-advocate? Like you mentioned, going to the GP and they don't know anything about it. So you tell them a bit about it. What's that like?
You get used to it now.
Yeah, absolutely.
It used to frustrate me, but now I can understand that they don't know anything about it because they obviously haven't been taught.
Yeah, and you haven't got a choice, have you? You got to sort of, for your own sake, tell them about it when they don't know. What do you have a particular approach? Is there a method that you've come up with to
No,
talk?
I just outright tell people.
Yeah.
I hide my condition. I don't really tell people about it unless I trust them.
Yeah.
There's a few mates at work who know about it, and they can understand why I'm a bit quirky to a degree, or why I do things or act strange sometimes when I can't do anything about it.
Mm.
So.
Yeah. And how do you feel about that? Because I always hid it for a long time, and then I started this podcast and I did a TEDx talk, and cat's out of the bag now, for those that didn't know. So I can't really hide it anymore. But I wanted to hide it for as long as I could until I had a change of heart, I guess. Because I didn't want people to know. It's kind of icky. It's kind of embarrassing. It's kind of something that I'm ashamed of, or I'm getting better at not being ashamed of it now. But like, I was afraid of what they might say. Not knowing what they might say was the problem, because they could say anything. So you tell close friends, and I think it's up to the individual. It's their information to share as they wish. But and the other thing too, like, if people have a problem with it, if your friends have a problem with it, then like they're not really
Worth it,
right? Yeah, exactly. And I always had a problem with that, because I was like, what if I end up with no friends? Like, I'd rather them not know and be my, you know what I mean? So how do you? What about your friends that don't mind? Like, how does that go?
they're cool with it because they can understand me, but a lot of them have found me to be highly intelligent in certain areas. Like my memory, I've got a very, very good memory. I can remember being a 1-year-old before my grandfather passed away. I can remember him giving me ice cream at the table. So I've got an early memory. I've got a broad general knowledge on a lot of topics, whether it be history, politics, Australiana, all these sorts of things, whereas a lot of people don't. I think one thing for me was they had on Christmas we had a quiz game, and they're asking how many ships were there on the first fleet. And everyone around the room's looking at each other like, I don't know, I don't remember. I can remember grade 5. I can remember 11 ships in the first fleet. And it's one of those things that I've got that kind of memory with that sort of stuff. I mean, Scott Morrison was on TV probably 6 months ago, and talking about it would have been actually been about Australia Day, and talking about the first fleet and the 12 ships, and on TV. I had to correct him when I was sitting in front of the new.
Far out. Do you have any, like, what's your favorite podcast, book about history, place to go for news about politics? What's anything you want to plug?
Like anything and everything to do with the Second World War. That's my
that's your particular area.
I think I studied it in high school, and I developed a big interest in it. So I've watched hundreds upon hundreds of videos.
What's the best one?
Books. This one.
Probably not one best one. There's probably heaps.
Books. There was one book, but I don't remember the name of it when I was in high school. We talked about like, the First World War. That was probably one of my favorite books. About like Gallipoli. And, of numerous docos, series and docos of Second World War.
There's so much out there about World War II. So it's a good thing to be obsessed with, because there's so much content, and it's so interesting. It's a bit it'd be a bit different if you were interested in something that there wasn't a lot to chew on. But you could spend your whole life watching and reading about it and never get to the end of it. To wrap it up, I just want to ask, have you got any advice for our community, people with Corpus Callosum disorders, and maybe people with disabilities in general?
Well, there is light at the end of the tunnel. I became severely depressed after my diagnosis. I wanted to learn anything and everything about ACC. I went to the Queensland Brain Institute and did numerous tests, scans, and what have you. But after learning about it, the social and emotional side got to me, and I suffered deep depression, anxiety, and the rest of it.
Yeah.
I had nothing to do with ACC or AusDoc for many years, purely and simply because at that time when I joined it, it was basically a giant mothers group.
Yeah, yeah.
And then up came the ACC adults, and that improved a lot. But and meeting and talking to other people with the condition is great as well. Noticed over the years.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really important point, to be able to connect with people that are like yourself who have the same troubles, and a lot of support networks are for parents, and that's kind of often not really what you need. So I think that's a great point to end on. Thank you so much for sharing your time with me and sharing your story and all your valuable lived experience. And I'd
Not a problem.
love to do this again sometime if you're willing, and get into the weeds a bit. But thank you so much.
Thanks, Mike.